No, no. Oh, no. Oh, oh my God. Oh, help me.
Weber, you good?
I had the worst dream.
How bad?
It was just a little nightmare.
Hello, I'm Max Weber. You're watching Goofing Off, and this is Weber's Horror Corner. Today, I'll be discussing a personal favorite of mine, the indie hit Little Nightmares 2? Wait. No, that's not right. Today, I will actually be taking it back to where the franchise began, Little Nightmares. Initially released in 2017, and with a batch of DLC following in 2018, this puzzle platforming horror game was developed by Tarsier Studios. Shocker. Upon release, the game garnered notoriety from gameplay YouTubers in the horror sphere as a whole, leading to raving reviews and a go-ahead for another game. The game was released to most systems and originally went by a different name, Hunger. A very fitting name considering. This title, like its successor, was also distributed by Namco and is the game in which you can actually wear the Paku mask, although a Switch exclusive. Little Nightmares will task the player with navigating the massive floating island known as the Maw, all while dodging danger, smashing silly jars, and even savoring a little snack. While the scale is notably smaller than the sequel, without this game's footwork, we would have never gotten such a gem. This first adventure is still oozing in ambience, and the art direction is as strong as ever. Well, with these introductions out of the way, we can get right into the gameplay and dive into the depths of the mall, and as always, spoilers are ahead. Little Nightmares sends the player through winding corridors and dashing through dangerous encounters with a variety of adversaries, all to reach the surface and escape the vessel. Well, there is another goal, which I'll discuss shortly. You play as Six this time around, a small fry of a main character, sporting a rain jacket and using a lighter to navigate the dark passages along your adventure. In this adventure, you will utilize the physics engine to solve puzzles and avoid danger by running, moving objects, cranking handles, and falling off every single thin walkway in the game. Little Nightmares has a major flaw in terms of perspective, as often the player will simply fall off sets due to drifting in your movement, that the player simply is unable to gauge. This problem was luckily fixed in the sequel. However, there is an achievement in the first title for beating the game quickly and without dying once, which is rough. This game is janky at times with hitboxes and the prior mentioned movement, which does result in many unfair or confusing deaths. However, the game as a whole still rocks on and delivers a quality experience that is unmatched by most titles in the horror genre. A smaller gameplay segment that occurs is Six's Hunger, which progressively becomes greater and greater as the game progresses, eventually ending up with the consumption of the lady. You will even end up chowing down on one of your gnome friends, which is made even more tragic by the DLC. Why? Well, you'll just have to watch and see. Puzzles follow the same trend presented in the sequel, featuring large rooms that involve multiple steps to progress in a layered system of solving. This system is as satisfying as ever, and one puzzle in particular I'm a big fan of is a water puzzle from the DLC. The player adjusts water to move a suitcase to jump across, as to make it under a door before closing. This door being cranked by an item that the player must retrieve and then use the same suitcase to move it into a position that allows for inserting into a slot. While not as complex as the puzzles from Little Nightmares 2, these layered segments are still fun and really test your intuition. Speaking of DLC, This game features extended chapters that take place alongside the main story of the game, of which even explains some plot conveniences and mysteries of the base game's adventure. The Runaway Kid has all the same moves as 6, however, utilizes a flashlight and is tasked with many water-themed puzzles in his side story. This DLC is easily the best chunk of the game, and it's much more similar to the scope of the sequel. You can really see the progress the devs made along the journey. One unfortunate plot point that is revealed through the DLC, however, is that the little gnome fellas you hug throughout both stories are actually runaway kids like you, who were transformed by the lady and forced to run the heart of the mall. And like those kids, the same thing ends up happening to you in your journey. Worse yet, as subtly hinted at earlier, you are the gnome that ends up being eaten by 6, which is made even worse by the fact that you also helped her in the cafeteria, which is why you, unlike other gnomes, trusted her off the bat and did not have to be convinced. On that simply heartwarming note, we might as well get onto a section of this game in which it really shines, along with the soundtrack as well. But did I even have to mention that? Anyhow, next up is monsters. Little Nightmares features 2 small enemy types, being the leeches and the shadow kids. The leeches are slimy little slithering monsters that are pretty harmless on their own, but come in swarms and are a real threat, worse when they enter the water. The shadow kids feature a black body and a simple white mask, which is very reminiscent of the lady, and are defeated by using her flashlight to vaporize them. Next up is the first big bad of the game, the janitor. This lanky looking fella is blind, however, has incredible hearing. Moving through the mines, workshops, and daycare of the mall, he really does it all. His name is Roger, by the way, if you even care. Roger, however, is defeated by 6, using the power of elevators with poor safety ratings. Must have been in Shrank. A peak design and a tense foe, the janitor is a pretty solid creature. Next up are the twin chefs. This is new. These big boys run the kitchen of the...
These big boys run the kitchen of the mall, and when spotting you, will try to cook you.
These big boys run the kitchen of the mall, and when spotting you, will try to cook you up, as food is food for the guests. These foes must be evaded by utilizing various kitchen items, and like all chefs, have a wonderful temper. Speaking of the guests, these are some big boys. Hungry as can be, and if you were spotted by these enemies, they will lunge towards you. Wearing masks and stomping around, these monsters come in massive quantities. See what I did there? And are relentless. The main reason the mall even exists is to feed these fellas. However, in the end, 6 gets the last meal. Second to last is the possibly misunderstood, waterlogged granny. She lurks in the depths of the flooded mall passageways and, frankly, is lonely. You don't visit enough. When's the last time you bothered to call? Anyhow, she's eventually defeated by the runaway kid using a wonderfully placed TV, which, to be fair, is hinted at earlier in the level. Shame too, she was almost old enough to join Congress. Finally, we got the head honcho of the mall, the lady. She is a masked figure with supernatural powers that can transform and destroy. The only thing she fears is herself, defeated by the use of mirrors. You get a good look at her reflection during the runaway kid segment. However, in reality, she looks normal, only haunted by the reflections of a warped mirror. The lady is the particular reason 6 even ventured to the mall to consume her power, which is a result of the events of Little Nightmares 2. You can reference game theory, or maybe even your uncle, as to the greater story surrounding the lore. Well, with all these monsters out of the way, we are onto a segment that speaks for itself. The soundtrack, while not as strong as its sequel, still has some incredibly strong tracks. Hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get right into it. Let's get into the killer soundtrack. Composed by Tobias Ilya, Little Nightmares soundtrack is a heavy blend of ambient haunting chorus and beautiful music box chords. A blend which works exceptionally and even brings in some horns for arguably the hardest track between both games. As always, here are my top 3. little side note as well, as there really wasn't anywhere else to put it, the composer also made an anniversary track while the wait for Little Nightmares 3 rolls on. I'll let this track play out, and then we'll get right into the conclusion. Little Nightmares is an exceptional horror, puzzle, and platforming game. While janky at times, the art direction and general atmosphere of the game well make up for the flaws. Little Nightmares 2 is a testament to the gold the devs struck during the creation of the base game and the DLC. And for a first title, it is a very strong one for the franchise. Well worth the fee to admission, Little Nightmares is a strong recommendation. And with that, all that's left is to send it off. I'm Max Weber. You've been watching Weber's Horror Corner, and this is Goofing Off.